So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today. I was telling Tyler I'll take one or two of these on a year because I love doing it, but it also gets quite intense, taking a lot of time to ensure that to the best of my ability it's relevant and current. So a little bit about me. I did grow up in Elora, and I was a Fergus Falcon over at CDHS. After there, I headed down to Nebraska, University of South Florida, which was USF. Most people called it University of Sun and Fun. And then I finished off my degree at the University of Guelph. Post-graduating from Guelph, I coached over here, and AGSI recently made a $150K commitment to the university with respect to some of the facilities. I was educated as a geographer, not an IT guy, but a person that understood kind of space, time, motion. And I used to be an athlete, and now I just refer to myself as a fat guy with a slim future. After I left Guelph, I went to work for OMAF back in the 1980s. And then in the 90s, I went to a company that was a Fortune 500 company based out of the US. The neat thing about that company is that it was started by 6 gentlemen that were literally rocket scientists. They were part of the Apollo space program. When that ended, they started this company, and I got to meet some really interesting individuals. And they used to laugh at us because they said, "You've got it easy." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Remember those big rockets that shot into space?" I'm like, "Yep." And he goes, "Well, fundamentally, we had 4 mainframes chained together inside of one of those things. And between all 4, we had 256K of RAM to go and do things such as the launch, the trajectories, actually get the thing to land on the moon. And today, I bet you around the room, each one of your cell phones has, quadruple that amount easily." And he goes, "Chris, but don't forget, after we had to program all that in, we had to remember to program something called life support." So they were very interesting individuals, and I was very fortunate to work with those folks. Early 2000, I'd always had this desire to kind of thinking that we could do it better, which I don't think is so different than what we're talking about here today. The OAFT, it's an Ontario-based organization that's going to take all this ingenuity, smarts that we have here, and expand that. And what can we do with it? And how do we expand internally, and how do we expand beyond our borders? So, a little bit more about the company. As Tyler mentioned, it was incorporated in 93, so we're 22 years strong. It's an independent consulting firm. We have 55 what we call information, but in this case, think about that as data and technology specialists. So it's not IT, but it's really about bringing together data and software together to provide a solution. And then we have 60 field staff spread across the country. They're actually on-the-ground people going out to check information and data, and you'll find out why in just a couple of seconds. We're headquartered right next door in the Halton Hills. I've got an R&D lab with 11 PhD and scientists over in Scarborough, where we just dream up funky stuff, and these guys actually go and make that happen. So again, I'm a geographer, I'm not a coder. We do have multinational operations. We're active in 7 countries around the world ourselves, and we've done everything from small-scale municipal type jobs to national scale jobs, such as the national premises template that we did for the government back in the early 2000s, for the federal government. So what we've done is we've got this product called Go360, which is kind of a bit of a transformational product, but what it does is that it works with data and all different kinds of data. And it works across all internet-enabled devices. And the important thing about this, it's not just us, of course we have competitors, but you've got these software products out there. You've got this thing called the internet, which continues to evolve. And then you have that flow of data that's occurring. Okay? It aggregates data and puts it into the hands of the people that need it. You just referenced the dairy farm with 120 different sensors. You know, what's important, what triggers me, how does it get from a farm that's maybe just outside my door, but if I own a bunch of farms, how do I hear what's going across my complete herd as a whole? Based on something called N-tier architecture, but I thought this slide was important because we're going to talk to a couple acronyms later on called M2M and IoT. And these products are available today out there and working, and that's what I'm going to try and make you aware of. We're also a gold partner with a company called Oracle. That's, I think, the third largest company in the world and the largest database company in the world. And of course, I have to remember to click this. Okay, when we look at things, we look at big data, but we think everything is data. So it could be a bit of a sensor. You know, we started with elections, so we have lots of information, or had, right? You have to keep it private, but about birth dates and driver's licenses and health cards and all those kinds of things that flow around about people today. Everything's data, whether that's a picture you take on your phone, something that's in your cache, you've got it. So this is just a reminder to tell me that I'm going to switch. I'm going to start talking about data now. Okay. One of the subjects that's out there that gets wrestled a lot with governments versus other folks is, should this stuff be free? We just put it out there. You know, if I look at Google or Bing, I see all this free data. I should be able to go ahead and use that. You know, so open data solutions. So governments and various interested parties, such as OpenStreetMaps, provide stuff for free that you can look at as long as, in the second case, you agree to their licensing terms. AGSI, on the other hand, is a for-profit company. We play in the free versus free realm. So fundamentally today, in Canada, if you call for house insurance, it's our data that person sitting there talking to you. We've got a point on top of your building, and we give a direction and distance to the road to other suppliers like iLookabout out of London that brings up a front-facing image. All this was started for fraud detection on insurance, where you're saying you have a 5,000 square foot home, but it's actually a shack that's tumbling over and about to fall. So that was very successful, and it took a lot of the fraud stuff and was dropping it significantly for them. It's now used with respect to assessed values on properties. So it's interesting that a piece of data can start with one purpose and end up morphing into something else. Okay. There we go. The thing I like about this section is that I know Tyler's got a few different RFPs out there right now as organization, and that they're delving into these complex issues, and you're going to see why they're complex in a few minutes. But I think, you know, with taking some of the lead, that it becomes, you know, a synergy between governments, between private corporations, between all of us that are out there trying to make a living in the agricultural sector. How does all that come together and create that value proposition in the province? And so now we're going to start a bit down that path of a journey. So there's many sides to data and its value. That's what we're going to talk about first, data values. And do we really know what those data values are and what it takes? So there's taxpayer-funded stuff, things that the government does, many forms of the government. There's investors out there invest in these companies, and there's payback for how that reflects. So if data is given away for free, it's in the hope when it's done by government that it's going to create a bunch of synergies and new business and pay back somehow. When it comes to value, there was a famous criminal that was asked in 1952, once he got caught. He was asked, why does he rob banks? It's pretty simple, because that's where the money is. It makes sense to me. So I think the famous criminals that we hear about today, whether you see them or whether they're hidden behind an anonymous mask, what are they stealing? They're stealing high-tech information or data. One of the best ones, I think it was 2013, the Australian Intelligence and Security Organization, somebody got into their systems and pulled everything that they had on everybody and operations that they were running straight out of their systems. They're not going to steal cash. The cash will eventually come because of the knowledge and the power that they have. And then, of course, personal information, right? Here's probably the most famous case lately, personal information, right? So, but what's that mean? You've got people killing themselves, you've got people paying ransoms, right? And you've got people that are embarrassed, but it's all just data. It all depends how you look at it. It's just really data. It's what you do with it and how you choose to monetize those things. So, if we kind of take the next step, street centerline data. So in my world, that means a lot. But fundamentally, if you've got GPS in your car, if you look at Google, you look at Bing, MapQuest, any of these places, you see these maps, nice base data maps. Great. Feels like it's free. It feels like when you buy a GPS for your car, you're paying for that hunk of hardware. It comes with the data. Well, kind of. In 1980, a company called Geographic Data Technologies was a startup company. In 2004, and all these guys did was drive cars around, picking up the street center lines, and tracking turn restrictions at corners, speed limits. They got acquired by TeleAtlas for $100 million. In 2008, TomTom acquired TeleAtlas for $4.2 billion. This is just a pure data company, okay? In 2007, Nokia acquired Navteq, $8.1 billion. So clearly, the data that we kind of think's for free has got huge value to people. 2013, Navteq was rebranded to a company called HERE. This year, Nokia acquires Alcatel-Lucent. Alcatel, of course, remember that started up in Ottawa here for $16.5 billion. One of the things that came out of the Competition Bureau is that they had to release HERE because you got these two massive telecom giants coming together. And what's the one part that they thought became anti-competitive? The data. You have to get rid of the data. So think about that. It's pretty powerful statements at the end of the day. So this data has got something to it. So in a fire sale, they dropped it out for $4.5 billion to BMW and friends. So it's pretty slick at the end of the day when you kind of go, I thought that stuff was free. So let's go closer to home. We're talking about Ontario. We're in Ontario. In the early 90s, I was with a company that earned the right to move the Ontario system from a land registry system where you search the last 40 years of the property you're going to buy to a land title system. You search it once, that's the deal, go. Okay? And it ended up becoming a company called TerraNet. So in 1989, 5 companies put up $10 million. It was basically startup capital and sweat equity. And it was services for the data, and it was to automate the land titles process. And they wouldn't start receiving any royalties until at least 50% of the land registry offices were converted. So these are where your homes are, your businesses are, your farms are. This is the data. In 2008, the TerraNet Income Trust Fund got sold for $1.2 billion to Borealis. And this is a job where the government owns the data. They sold for $1.2 billion just to be the guys to have the right to service and keep the data up to date and have all these things happen right here at home. In 2010, TerraNet secured their long-term ability to do this for the government. So again, the services deal was between 2 private companies. They still had to come back to the government, and they paid them $1 billion just to be able to service that to us in the province of Ontario for 50 years. And of course, in 2017, they have to start paying royalties back on that data and those pieces to the Ontario government. So they're receiving the money. And then there is an ongoing suit because the Ontario land surveyors are the people that create the data in the first place. So they feel it's copyright infringement. If they get copyright, then they get a piece of every transaction every time property changes hand in the province. So that's ongoing as of today. One of the other neat deals that they've done is they created this Ontario Parcel Alliance between themselves, MPAC, so we all pay property tax, that's MPAC, and the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources on behalf of the remaining Ontario government. M&R pays them $1.5 million a year to keep the data up to date. MPAC pays them $3 million a year to keep their data up to date, which is all based on that same source data set. So data is worth a lot. And it's worth a lot. It touches us every day. It may be a small bit and a land transfer tax, which isn't really a small bit, but it's there. Okay? So it's important to see that. I think at times, there we go. At times, we think, well, the software is the big thing. Any software vendors that I see out there say, oh, the data should be free, buy my software. No, sure, that's the business that they're in. What you find is that software companies come and go, though, and it's the data that remains. It's the data that gets worked on. That's the knowledge. In the past couple of decades, location-based software has started to heat up. So I got this little bit of information, but where is it? Okay? The company called here says it's here. We ask where it is. Some companies like WAS, Google purchases for $1 billion or more to add location to activities out there on the internet. Data is being consumed everywhere, and it's in all of our handhelds. We probably all have cell phones, is my guess. And the handheld is just another device on the net. I'll tell you that storage is important. Don't let somebody lock you into their proprietary data formats, because then they have you about what I call the short and curlies. You cough, you have to write them a check. It's your data. You own it. Keep it so that it's available for use. Exchange and use of data is very important. Between systems, you should be able to exchange data freely, securely, but freely. And the use of data is very important, and I'll expand on that later. And fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, knowledge from data is power. The investment is in the data, and that's where it gets retained. So I talked about street center line maps that you see. But if we look around us here, there's can to post data, postal codes, the roads, the property boundaries, the addresses. You know, another piece of data lots of people don't think about, points cards. Got an air miles card, take a point here, a point there. That's data. Checkout questions. What's your postal code? I never give my postal code, even if it is the LCBO. You said it's free later, right? Phone directories. Statistics Canada demographics. And it goes on and on and on. And then you start blending that stuff. So, you know, some of the stuff we do is we go out and we ground truth. Where's that data coming from? So the road names, the houses, having points right on top of buildings, parks, all kinds of stuff. If you look at that in another context, here are the postal codes, where we take it right down to the property boundary edges by 6-digit postal code. And then when we blend together that other data, and I've got banks come to us with Visa cards, and they tell me this is how these people spend. We want to know where they are. We want you to tell us what they're like. Fundamentally profile you. How old are you? Do you have kids? Do you work a full-time job? You know, all kinds of things. What kind of car's in your driveway? All that blends together. Okay? That goes on every single day. Okay? So your profile, it's out there. Whether you know it or not, it's out there. It's being used. It's being used, they'll tell you, to offer you opportunity of a lifetime. I would suggest maybe there's some of that, or maybe it's to manipulate you into buying some of their products. So, all right. I have some extra slides in here. MDAM. I mentioned MDAM earlier. Anybody know what that is? Machine to machine. Machine to machine communications. The thing about machine to machine transactions and communications, where you basically have two devices touching, they're connected. Some phones have bump on them, and you can share pictures as an example. But these are fundamentally two devices that are embedded with software, electronics, and sensors in them so that they know what to do. This has been happening for years. It happens in your car, and they plug in the ODB under your dashboard for the onboard diagnostics when you get the little idiot lights on your dashboard. Your pets, you lose them, you get the chip under the skin, they scan them, they pull up your pet information. Your passport when you go through customs. Closed circuit TV cameras, etc. Well, this has kind of progressed. So now, machine to machine and IoT. The Internet of Things, absolutely. Okay? So it's taking those machine connections, using the internet background, and making data flow everywhere. We talked about the dairy farm earlier. It's a perfect example. Whether it's one farm or a whole series of farms that you're tracking, you've got that information at your fingertips, and you basically set up to ask it what you're tracking for. You want to know what alarms you. If I woke up in the middle of the night and this happened, I probably want to know that's one of my alarms. So the things here are physical things. They're out there, physical objects, and then you apply devices to those. They sense and they can control things remotely. Open and close dams, different things like that. In 2013, machine-to-machine transactions eclipsed human-to-machine transactions. So all the time we sit there on the internet doing stuff, doing your banking online, all that stuff. No, we got past. Okay? There's so much going on out there. It's pretty interesting. And the difference in these transactions, when we as people interact with the internet, they're pretty heavy loads that you're putting on it, whether you're pulling down PDF documents or loading something into the cloud, you're there. Machine-to-machine transactions and sensor transactions are typically very low bandwidth, but there's a lot of them. And they stream fast, and it's important to be able to diagnose those. And they come out, fundamentally, what you're looking at is in real time. And in 2020, so just 5 years from now, they think there will be 50 billion things connected and communicating. That's a lot. So the anatomy on the back end of one of these systems is you got the things, those physical entities, fridge, car, tractor, shipping containers, water pumps, cows in a field. It's all a thing, something you can touch. You have sensors, the information collection. You have the communication that ties it together, whether you're, last gasping off a satellite or whether you've set up your own information communication backbone, Zigbee system, for example, on your own property. Servers for some processing power, storage to save the information, because you probably want to go back and analyze it. And today, a lot of the information that's going on out there is predictive analysis. I'm having this happen. This is what's about to happen. Here's what's trending. And then you've got the part where we get involved, the user-facing services. We got all this stuff going on in the background, and then there's a bit when it gets to us, being the people. So, Fitbit. I think this is a great example. So Tabitha, my much better half, comes home with a Fitbit. She puts this thing on. She's walking around, and it gives her step counts. But it gives her step counts. Sometimes it vibrates on her wrist. Other times it sends a congratulation text message to her phone. So what we're taking is this physical device on a person, tracking what's going on, heartbeat, steps, et cetera, It's analyzing the data and then feeding it back to her in a meaningful way that gets her excited about what she's doing to stay engaged in that, and away she goes. So, I thought that was pretty neat, because to me it starts becoming this machine-started transaction. So data being sent from a machine to you, stroking our egos about how good we did that day. So when I started talking to some of the internal team about what we're doing, they had some ideas. And we said, well, man, this could be on all livestock. Let's Fitbit our livestock. What could we pick up? And lo and behold, the next thing I find is the Fit bark. So literally goes on the collar of a dog that goes out there that's tracking all this stuff. And the fun parts is suddenly you're getting these, what we like to call executive dashboards in corporations, but in this case I call it a personal dashboard. About, geez, is my puppy getting enough exercise, because I thought it was getting pretty fat. And it's going to be like Cameron, fat guy, slim future. Fat dog, slim future. So it's pretty neat when you look at it as it starts to distill information at you, right? This is all data. This is all big data. This is all happening around us. So I get from there, and lo and behold, what do I find? Cows that are sending out text messages. Hey? I thought it was pretty awesome. So it's all thanks to machine and the Internet of Things. And why I thought it was important. So there's a French monitoring company, experts called Medra. They have the Velphone, and it notifies you when a cow starts calving, wherever it is. And then there's the heat phone. This is the one I like. Because this tells you when a cow's in heat, it's time for insemination. So, for those of you who know me, I normally crack a lot of off-color jokes. So, here we go. Now, this started to work when they hooked up with Dutch Telecom. What are they? Well, they're a big backbone provider of the internet. So they've got SIM cards in these things. They do the calls, out they go, and voila, this system's active. And I thought, what a neat thing that was created over there. Geez, with some of the activities that we're doing here, look how we can melt technology, data to bring out new products. And they're currently equipping 5,000 farms across Europe with this technology. So if it gets going, it's active there, you can bet it'll be coming this way. Okay? Some of you guys are probably going, is he ever going to talk about big data? So we got here. We're shifting gears one more time. So I'm big data. What is it? What is it really? When I think about it, it's a buzzword or a catchphrase for a whole bunch of stuff. I think it's massive volumes of what we call structured data. So I gave you the Terranet example earlier. Land titles, they're very structured. They're in a database. You know what you do with them. You know how people and systems interact with them. But there are significant volumes of data in there. And then there's unstructured data. In this case, I'm going to use a social media example later on. But you start thinking about the Twitters and the YouTubes and the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Snapchats and the on and on you go. There's tons of data that's flowing around out there. And how do you take unstructured data and make it useful for you? That's big data. So typically, I think everything comes down to that the volume of data is just too big to deal with. And the speed of data is that it's coming at me too fast. This stuff's coming live, streaming at me. And guess what? I'm going to sleep at least 4 hours when I'm preparing for this presentation. Thanks, Tyler. And, but it's active. And there's times where you stop. And there's times where the human computer needs a break. Okay? So we need to be able to work with that. So a bit of big data definitions that we've worked with in the past, kind of some of the current viewpoints, is called the 4 V's. So you have the volume of data, the velocity of data as it comes in and out, the variety of data, types and sources. So variety of data, if you just think of it, it's a little bit of data of somebody's name, year of birth, it's one thing. It's very different if it's a movie file, a WAV file, a picture, satellite image. It's all this data that's flowing around out there. And then the veracity of it. It's the uncertainty of that data. Will it be a consistent stream or will it suddenly stop? These were brought to us by Gartner through a meta group that Gartner bought, but that was way back in 2001 when they started considering this. And of course, 2012, IBM, same spot, good stuff. Emerging viewpoints, big data equals kind of these large big data databases out there, things like Hadoop and NoSQL databases that you just fire tons of data into and you can somehow get at it at the end of the day. And then your traditional relational systems where you've structured that data together. And this was 2013 by Facebook and 14 by Gartner Group. And then I would say there's kind of the new viewpoint on big data. And instead of the 4 V's, we have the 4 S's now. But fundamentally, you're worried about the significance of data. We talked about social media. There's a lot of insignificant stuff there. On your farm, you have 130 sensors, and they could be firing at you all the time. You only find it significant when it's outside of an acceptable range. Okay? Standardization of processes and data. So where does that matter and why does it matter? Security. Security's big. Who all gets to see my data? Where is it? I've got my nephew working with me on the farm, and that's great, but he doesn't get to look at all my data. He gets to see the little bits that are important to his role here, or a worker. And then fundamentally, the amount of spend. There's just, if you're investing that much in it, then that's significant data, and you invested because you want certain results. This was brought out by Oracle Corporation last year, but I would say very significant for what we're looking at. So that's some of the high-level stuff. I think it's important to know and think about that, but then I start breaking it down to, well, okay, so how does that affect me? Or help me put that in terms of things that I can deal with. So I'm going to talk about Toronto Hydro as one of our customers. They do live monitoring of transformers. So transformers are those buckets that you see out there on the pole outside your driveways. If you live in a subdivision, they're the green pad mounts that you'll see on the ground. And this is kind of structured data that monitors on these that communicate back. And they have 200,000 of these in the city of Toronto. And if you guesstimate that they're worth, say on average, not the really big ones, not the really small ones, but about $10,000 each, right? You're talking, there's a significant asset investment that they need to know what's going on that they were never able to before big data in the Internet of Things. Okay? At Toronto Hydro, they have these things, report to them every 15 minutes. And it's oil temperatures and all kinds of different things on it. So 200,000 at every 15 minutes a day. For those of you trying to do the quick math, it's 19.2 million records a day. In a week, it's 134.4 million records. In a month, it's 4.2 billion records. And in a year, it's 50 billion records. Okay? So big asset, lots of information coming at me. Now the challenge is to take that information and make it valuable to my business. So what's the value? What does Toronto Hydro get out of that at the end of the day? Number one thing that they caught, theft of power. You know, we've done some work over in India where that's a massive issue. I wasn't thinking about Toronto. Voila, there it was. And then the other two that come from the asset management side of the business. The first one is overloaded transformers, the ones that blow. So you can tell that they're being overloaded. You can determine that you need to swap those out. But what we've found is that in a day, a transformer overloaded can lose 2% of its life. So you know you want to get that out, put in a bigger transformer to that location. So that, first of all, you maintain your service to your end clients. And two, that your capital budgets, you don't have to go out and worry about buying as many of these things. You can have them run a longer lifespan. And the same thing with the underloaded ones. Well, I got this great piece of equipment out there, and it's going to last forever. But if I swap it with the overloaded one, voila, away we go. And we run a better business. So, big data. How does big data information about your business flow back to you? Very key. At the same time, I'm going to talk about something else that everybody has, and that's called a smart meter. So probably if you look outside your house, your cottage, you've got a smart meter. So smart meter looks something like this. For you at the back, you have to squint. Okay. So I should have had extras printed, but the smart meter time sequences and how they report is this kind of complicated looking diagram as they turn on and off. But there's a lot of transactions between that meter on the side of your house and as it reports back to the utility. It will track power fluctuations when the power goes out, when it comes back on. And those transactions have to be dealt with. And what you find interesting, because they go across a mesh network, is that events that happened prior to other ones can come in after another event's recorded. So you have to be able to sort and track the types of events that happen on the side of your house. So basically, the logic for those transactions is something that's just as hard to see from the back of the room are all the different steps of what you have to do to restore power to a building. The next one was one of my favorite slides because fundamentally what it shows out there are transformers talking to back-end systems, substations talking, meters talking, and they now know, certain utilities that have invested in the technology now know your power's out before you call. The nice thing is that their operators know so that when you call, they can give you an expected time of restoration. So these are all structured transactions going on, big data that affect you, your buildings, your manufacturing facilities, processing, your burns, etc. And even at that point, we can take structured data and we can blend it with unstructured data. So if there's a power outage, we can tell, if we look at Instagram or Twitter, that some guy has smoked through a pole and we got a broken pole, so we know that we got to get a pole out there. If a tree came down, we know we got to get the arborists out there to clean that up. And so you're dispatching the right people to the scene, and you know in advance if there's a fire, call the appropriate response agencies. Get back to what we're doing here, and we'll talk about agriculture. So, and AGSI. So as I mentioned before, we started working for OMAFRA back in the 80s. And we worked on soil mapping and analytics of the mapping. We did the crop insurance analysis, which all gets done today by AgriCorp. We did RAP plans for a remedial action plan to clean up the Great Lakes, 32 sites on our borders. Hagersville tire fire. We were the guys that calculated with Bob Vandenbroek universal soil loss equations and how this started at the top of the watershed and flowed down through which farms when, predictive analysis to stop feeding your cattle, etc. We worked with Ontario cattlemen's back in the early 2000s. We wrote the national template for farm premises. We worked with CFIA and tripartite simulations, but fundamentally where they said this used to take us 3 weeks to do, we now do in 15 minutes, right? Because the data is there, we just tapped into it. We are the people that are currently running the Ontario Premises Registry. So hopefully everybody has their PPR certificate that's a producer, processor, etc. And we've just recently worked with Mike McMorris and created Go 360 BioTrack, which is a next generation of taking the information that they have and storing it up into new ways of doing business. So here's the tricky part. What have I just done? Okay. Yeah, I made a public announcement. I told you about myself personally. I told you about my corporation. I would love to know everybody here, but I don't. And guess what? It's out there. So all you folks now know this information. So how does that relate to what's going on? Well, this is it. This is social media. Right? You sign up to these things. You say, as soon as it goes out there, it's out. It's gone. It's done. Bye-bye now. So then you get smart guys like the folks that work around me to make something happen. So this is where we talk about unstructured data. There was too much information to track, and no, I can't. It's not the matrix. I can't look at a computer screen of things running up and down and go, oh, that's the lady in the red dress. I can't see that. Okay? This is information flowing fast and furious. And since we're short on time, I'm going to skip down here to a meeting I had with Franco over at Ontario Fresh. And both our companies are right in the Milton area, maybe 10 minutes apart, and I had a great conversation with Franco. And what we talked about, well, what if we use social media to market farmers markets all across the province? Fairs. What about for the people that are selling eggs on their property here or right at the gate? What if we did a 10-kilometer radius around and say, hey, you're going to drive right by my place, I just have a whole new fresh set of eggs out. Stop on in and get a great deal. Are there ways that we can take unstructured big data and turn around into revenue for the producer? I hope so. And then I think we need to look at big data for benefit. Let's protect ourselves. Let's not frighten ourselves into a corner, but how are we going to benefit from it? How are we going to share it? How are we going to take advantage of hardware, software, but most importantly, the information that remains consistent forever? Okay, and sample applications. Base maps are used for contacts, but there's public security. There's the sensor web, which was really what was there before machine to machine. We called it the sensor web, primarily. Posting back notices, health traceability. Right? When we did the work for CFIA 10 years ago, the guy who still heads up our app development goes, let's go talk to Health Canada. Because people, they're the same. Diseases travel the same. Let's go get this figured out and do some cool stuff. Right? So there's a fine line that you get to walk here on big data, and it's about using it appropriately and in a trustworthy fashion. Okay? Yahoo, Skype, all these guys, they're subject to US law. They had to dump all of their databases, all the information they had about everybody, hosting systems, everybody. NSA got it. Right? Snowden, it's an interesting case, but it's certainly, I think, done a lot of work towards privacy. Twitter, Snapchat. Snapchat. I don't know if anybody's seen Snapchat, but I send you a message, you read the message, and then it dissolves. It's kind of like that. Maxwell Smart. They don't go away. They just launched a service that you can go back and get any one of those that supposedly snapped, went away for 99 cents each. You can see them again. Twitter's the same way. They've saved all tweets ever, even the deleted ones. The deleted ones are, particularly important in certain cases. Okay? Big data. Who owns your data? Who owns your digital footprint? Who owns information about you? I think it matters when you start thinking about, the tractors that are out there that are sensing your soils out front. They're shooting out chemicals and seeds, et cetera, out back. Why couldn't they have a map of your farm with your soil qualities? It could affect the value of your property. I don't know. Can they use it? Can't they use it? I haven't read their contract. Think about free apps. Google gives it away for free, but they're collecting stuff in the background and selling it all over the place. This is one. If you scan a label on a food product, cool. But is it saved in my cache? Is somebody else reading that? If I need to go apply for health insurance and it shows that I only eat Doritos, that could be a problem. I like the color orange, so I'm just saying, that's all right. But, my insurance company may not. So I think opportunity abounds. It's already occurring all around us. We all have big digital data footprints. I think you need to tap into it. I think it's great. Good examples what Bio's doing. They're jumping on. They're pulling together their systems. They're making them very farm-friendly management. That's great stuff. And, environmental detections, things that are going on your farm properties, things that are going on up there in the environment. Start-to-end tracking of a piece of food. Right? It's going to be touched all over the place by different software systems, sensors, other things. But all you have to do is follow that thread. It's not that hard. And it's not one single company, because it will be many companies along that chain. Fitbit your livestock, as an example. We just use Fitbit as the name, but it makes sense that we will be reading activities. And I think you get to open lots of new markets by tapping into the data management, where problems are going on around the world, where we can help, maybe offer services, products, where they're having issues. And personally, I think it's the new Canadian economy. I know that the oil markets have, they're hurting. I own a couple of Priuses, and I drove the other day from Milton to our offices in Annapolis, Maryland, $28.50 in gas. Right? Nice hybrid vehicle. It's a lot of fun. People, there are so many more people, and our worldwide population counts go up. They're going to need good, healthy, quality foods. Let's tap into that. That's our future, in my humble opinion. And I think at the end of the day, we just want to enjoy this responsibly because we're doing it for our little gaffers, the generations after us, and us, so that we can just spend time with them. So thank you for your time.